stage being built this morning for President Macron's rally tonight. You don't choose a backdrop like this if you're not confident of winning. Last time it was the Louvre, this time it is the soaring metal of the Eiffel Tower. Now imagine him losing. They certainly can't. Also in the shadow of that tower, the Paris Book Fair, a mecca for metropolitan Macron voters, where many a shelf celebrates the president and his thoughts. Here, Marine Le Pen exists only as an existential threat, an invisible spectre from an alien world.
Alors vous avez de Tocqueville, Molière, Flaubert, Emmanuel Macron, mais où est la philosophie de Marine Le Pen?
On to Adrien Bosque, here to promote his book on the late Simone Weil, Holocaust survivor, feminist and politician, here also to talk about the election.
There is one choice, it's democracy and not fascism.
And Macron's democracy and she is fascism?
Yeah, it's quite easy because it's the history of the party of Le Pen. It's fascism from the beginning and from now.
Because a lot of them would be very insulted to hear that you describe a vote for her as a vote for fascism.
I'm not describing the vote for Le Pen, and I'm not describing that the citizens are fascist. I describe that the party is fascist.
If Marine Le Pen wins tonight, if she becomes the president of the Republic, how will you feel? How will this whole book festival feel? I mean, what happens to your world?
It will be a completely different world, I think, but also, for example, for the idea of open-minded culture, but also they have, I think, it's an old vision of literature, it's an old vision of culture, of history. It's also, we sell fake news, but it's also fake reading of history.
Merci beaucoup, Marine, et bonne chance. Merci. Bonjour.
Marine Le Pen has softened her image and refined her promise to restore the paradise lost of small-town France, haunted by the fears of economic and social insecurity. The fact that she would be France's first female president has been overshadowed by her nationalist politics. Also voting today, also schmoozing with a baby, President Macron. The polls have all been in his favor. But if he's re-elected, it's not because he's loved, but because he embodies the last stand of France's political center. But many voters apparently just don't care. They've chosen to become non-voters, caught between their fear of Le Pen and their disgust for Macron. Like here in Aubervilliers, on the outskirts of Paris.
Ce tour-là, je ne voterai pas. Surtout pas Macron. Pas Macron parce que là, il a fait trop de mal aux gens et il y pense que pour les riches. Et là, le deuxième tour, je ne le ferai pas. Je vais venir faire mes courses, c'est plus important que voter Macron ou Le Pen.
The magnificent courtyard of the Louvre. This is where Macron held his victory rally 5 years ago. He was channeling too much Sun King, too much l'état c'est moi, I am the state. This time round, it'll be very different, even if he wins.
Well, joining me now here on the bridge with his analysis is Victor Mallet, who's the Financial Times' bureau chief here in Paris. Victor, thanks for coming here. From what you've seen so far in terms of turnout numbers, also taking into account the polls before Election Day, how is this going?
Well, it looks as though Macron will win. Nobody can be certain because the official results don't come out, as you said, in just under an hour, and then we will really know. But the fact that the turnout is not quite so bad as some people expected suggests that he probably will win, as the opinion polls suggested. But I think whoever wins, even if Macron does come back into power and gets a second term, the far right will never have been so strong in France since the Second World War. And the extremes, in fact, on both left and right, will never have been so powerful in French politics. So that is it's going to be a pretty difficult second term, even if he wins, as we think he probably will in an hour's time.
Because he's the last man standing in the centre, more or less, isn't he? He embodies le centre, c'est moi, he might as well say.
That's right. Well, he's called it actually the extreme centre, and
That's not very helpful.
No, well, but so there he is with the far right on one side and the far left on the other, and those were the three candidates that got the most votes in the first round 2 weeks ago. So yes, it is a very sort of peculiar situation, and the traditional parties that have governed France since the Second World War, the Socialists and the Republicans, are nowhere. They didn't even make the 5% they need to claim back their campaign expenses.
I don't get it, to be honest, Victor. I mean, unemployment is relatively low. The country, certainly here in Paris, but also other places I've been to, seems relatively affluent. And yet the French are notoriously miserable about their lot. And also, as you said, the extreme votes on left and right, are in the majority. Why has this country gone to the fringes?
Well, I think it's part of a global phenomenon. This isn't just happening in France. We're seeing similar stuff in the US when Trump got elected. Brexit, frankly, was a similar situation. People were against immigrants, they were against Europe. So that kind of is a global trend, and you have dictators and authoritarians and populists and nationalists really sort of dominating over the traditional liberal internationalists who've been in power in the West for a long time. So this isn't just a French phenomenon, but it is true that the French, it's been said, are a nation of people who live in paradise and think they live in hell. And
is that fair?
Well, I think they are famously sort of complaining especially about their politicians, and Macron in particular seems to have been the target for a lot of hate. Yes.
And if Marine Le Pen were to become the next president of France, how much of an earthquake is that for the rest of Europe?
It's a big earthquake, not just for Europe, but for the world, because she's threatened to take France. Well, she said she will take France out of NATO's military command. She is a known associate and friend of Putin's. I think, as you said, she's been, financed by Russian banks in the past, and she will effectively, people interpret her attitude towards the EU as essentially meaning Frexit, the departure of France from the EU, because she is so radically wanting to reform the EU that essentially will mean France has to leave.
And Macron has done the opposite, hasn't he? So will she be a bit like Viktor Orban? She'll take the EU money, but she'll try and hollow out the institution from within.
Yes, I mean, what she wants is a kind of loose federation of sovereign states, including particularly places like Hungary and Poland. And she actually wants to cut France's contribution to the EU by 5 billion euros as a start, and then she will declare the primacy of French law over European law, and there's a whole series of other steps to do with immigration and the environment and the economy that will essentially mean that France can't really be a member of the EU.
Just briefly, she's only got 7 deputies in the Assembly. I know they've got elections coming up as well in June, but can she govern with such a small number?
No, I mean, she can't. She has to wait until the legislative elections, the National Assembly elections.
Will she do a lot better? Or how
well, so yes, she probably will, but the question is whether there would be a sort of blocking or opposition majority against her in those elections. The left and the centre-right will probably, and the centre, Macron's centre, will come out against her in those elections and make it very difficult for her to govern.
Okay. Victor Macron, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.